Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about long double action pull triggers and windage problems. A lot of people have windage problems with guns like cars and Taurus Millennium Pros, some revolvers, Beretta 92s, SIGs and double action, things of that nature, primarily because of this long trigger pull. If it's a double action, single action gun, they almost always shoot perfectly on single action mode. And also when they go to the range and practice, they're always shooting in single action. They don't decock and go try double action pull the whole time. What this tends to create is training errors, bad training scars. And people always blame the gun and not them for those errors. Prime example is guns like this car. Lately there have been a lot of people talking about their rear sight being way over in the dovetail to get the shots actually in the bullseye where they want to hit. They're fine in elevation, but they're very off when it comes to windage. The primary issue is that a lot of people who have been shooting for all this time haven't really taken any professional instruction. Now that's not to say that people who just shoot a lot don't know what they're doing, but they don't learn a lot of aspects from people who are more experienced from them. Primary example number one is a lot of people that shoot rifles know that you want your finger to be perpendicular to the bore when the shot breaks. That will keep the stock from moving, and that will keep the action and the sights from moving off the target. We're talking about a rifle that has 3 points of contact at minimum: your shoulder, your cheek, and your forearm support, which could be a sling in your hand, it could be a bipod, it could be sandbag, whatever. We're talking about 3 points of contact. With a pistol, we've got 2, our hands, and it's out floating out in the open. Now, if you notice, a lot of people, they know to put the pad approximately the middle of their index finger on the face of the trigger, and that's fine and dandy. What that does is that creates your finger being perpendicular to the bore. That's great for guns like 1911s with a short trigger travel. But when they pull through, they just pull the finger back. And if you look carefully, you'll see that the finger is at almost a 45-degree angle, which means pressure is being put right here on the edge. And what it's actually doing is it's pointing the gun to one side. Exaggerated, obviously, but it's happening right when the shot breaks. Now, that can throw your shot way off. And if you don't know how to follow your sights and call your shots, which is basically watching your front sight post and being able to determine right when the moment of recoil happens, knowing where that front sight is, that's where your bullet goes. So if you can learn that, that will save you a lot of time and energy and frustration because you'll know exactly what happens, and you'll learn to trust your iron sights. A very slight modification to this style of a pull is actually just to let this entire portion of the finger go slack when you're pulling, which is basically we're taking our index pad, we're putting it right there, which if you look, it creates that 90 degree, but when we pull, we're letting this joint right here go slack, and it's still perpendicular to the bore when the shot breaks. That is what will keep the windage from happening, short of your sights being very loose in the dovetail and moving upon recoil, and which they'll eventually fall out, or there being a very bad burr on the end of the barrel, which will pull the bullet in one direction or the other as it exits the barrel. Almost all windage problems is the fault of the shooter. Yes, they have adjustable sights, and yes, you can adjust these sights for how your body is built and just grabbing it and shooting it and having your sights line up. What that does is that compensates and has the gun go a certain direction. That is honestly a band-aid. It will help you as far as getting accurate quickly. However, what it does is it only lets you do that with that particular gun. Now, if you just learn the proper techniques and fundamentals for how to shoot, you won't have to adjust that. A lot of people argue that 2 guns of the same kind will never shoot to the same exact point of aim, point of impact, and there's a lot to be said about that. That's very true. But keep in mind, we're dealing about pistols that are floating out in the middle of the air. So when you're actually shooting, it is moving. It's doing a little figure-8 deal. It only has 2 points of control over it, your hands. It doesn't have anything else. And we're also talking about usually a 9 to a 45 caliber hole. close is good enough with pistol sights. You can have your rear sight slightly off and still hit darn near perfect. Especially with these really close sights, and as you get smaller and smaller in the guns, they get closer and closer together. You have a shorter and shorter sight radius, and it's harder to tell if your sights are actually off. So just keep in mind, guys, that it sounds great to say that it's the gun that's pulling left or right of the other, because you don't do it with your revolvers or your CZ75, your SIG double action only, or something like that. The SIG is, I'm sorry, not the SIG, the car is very unique in that the distance between the back strap, this portion right here, hence your palm, and this portion right here on the trigger face is very, very close when the shot breaks. That's a very, very short trigger travel. And if you'll notice, the trigger breaks at the vertical point, at least when we're drawing the line from the end to the axis. That breaks at a vertical point, but your finger is actually past vertical when the shot breaks. So that creates a very unique situation. You don't find a lot of guns. So guys, hate to break it to you, if you're having problems with a long double action pull, especially in windage, it's you, it's not the gun. Just go ahead and say, okay, let's go back to basics and focus on slow fire and focus as much as you can on that trigger finger, and I guarantee you, you'll start to hit point of aim, point of impact pretty quickly. Just blaming the gun, it's just encouraging bad training habits and training scars, which will make you fundamentally a worse shooter later down the line. If it comes down to it and you ever have to use your gun in a defensive situation, if you're bothering to look for a sight picture and focusing on trigger pull and all that stuff, you're probably not fighting for your life. Let's be honest about that. So for defensive situations, you're probably not even going to use the sight, let alone probably even remember pointing out of the holster. So don't worry about that aspect, but when you're training with it, try your best to train all those training scars out of you and get back into good fundamentals. Because good fundamentals, all those advanced skills you learn later in life, build upon good fundamentals, and you have to have those to be better. So just a couple words of advice, guys.